Przechodzimy już do absolutnego meritum tej konferencji. Dzisiaj jesteśmy w czasie, kiedy chyba można powiedzieć, że potrzeba jest takich jakichś dynamicznych i odważnych wizji rozwoju sektora publicznego w Polsce. Nie tylko w Polsce, ale my dzisiaj o Polsce mówimy. Dlatego postanowiliśmy zaprosić do nas naprawdę światowej klasy eksperta, człowieka, który na ten temat wie wszystko bądź prawie wszystko i wspólnie zastanowić się, jakie drogi mogą być najskuteczniejsze w tym procesie w Polsce, korzystając z doświadczeń innych krajów. Artur Mickoleit jest analitykiem firmy Gartner, pracuje z rządami bardzo wielu krajów Europy Środkowej, ale nie tylko środkowej, również zachodniej, również z krajami arabskimi, nad strategiami cyfryzacji właśnie. Wcześniej był analitykiem OECD i współautorem rekomendacji dla rządów w tym zakresie. Jest absolwentem, to jest ciekawy profil jego zawodowego życia, jest absolwentem nie tylko studiów informatycznych, komputerowych, ale także studiów politologicznych na Uniwersytecie w Manchesterze. Digital government is not about putting services online, it is about changing the culture of administration. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Artur Mickoleit. We're very curious to listen to your presentation. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
And the floor is yours.
Dziękuję. Dzień dobry. Good morning. Thank you very much for having me here today. And my intention is indeed to give you a little bit of an impulse from an outsider's perspective. But I'm happy enough that I've been to Poland already. I've worked on a couple of things with the administration in Poland. So I hope some of the things that I say will connect to you. And if they don't, then of course I'm still here during the day. I would be very happy to speak and try to connect. Because the question is, what is digital government and digital change is about? And as just in the introduction, it's not about putting services online. It's really about changing the culture of how the administration acts and interacts in the 21st century. So something that I usually start with is a visual. In the public administration, we constantly have problems. We want to be better services to citizens, better services to businesses, but there's also regulation, budgets, people, a lot of issues. So this is how public administration looks like, problems to solve. Digital change is not about solving problems. It helps to solve problems, but digital change and digital transformation is about real change. This is how real change looks like. You change the form. You change how things look like. That is the change that public administrations sometimes have a difficulty of imagining how can this look like. It looks quite good on the slides, but how does it look like in the reality of public administration? And I want to give you a few examples. So this is what we're going to do, just a couple of examples about what is change in the public sector, why is it important, and then how do we make it happen. Take this simple example, and it's something that every administration that I speak with can connect to. Parents that give birth to a child usually, and also in Poland, of course, have the right to a lot of subsidies, to aids, to assistance, but they also have to do certain obligatory things like getting a birth certificate and others. Traditionally, the public administration, and especially the agency that is, for example, responsible for allowance to parents, childcare allowance to parents, would say, okay, we put it online. That's what the government in Germany has done. Our agency put the subsidies online, so you as a parent can get it without filling in paper. But that's not enough. And why is it not enough? It's a simple reason. Because easy plus easy plus easy does not make easy. If you have one administration that makes an easy process, a second administration, and the municipality, and the Ministry of X, and the Ministry of Y, and the agency of Z, And all of them have their own service, which are all easy, but the parents, they have to go through all this. It's not easy anymore. Luckily, things are changing. And I know they are changing in Poland as well. And you have automated certain things, you have made it more easy. But something that is still missing very often is this bigger picture. How can we really make the whole experience for citizens easier? And it doesn't come out so clearly maybe in the image, but in Germany, they created labs, innovation labs, where people from the different agencies and the different ministries and also the municipality, but not all of them, just 1, 2, 3, 4, come together, and they invited parents and to share the experience, real people, real citizens, to share the experience of what is working well right now and what is not working so well. So they analyzed the problem and they said, I know, we have all these competencies, we have all these laws that make it, at the moment, impossible to make things really easy for parents. But let's be modest and let's try to build something like a little prototype that shows what would be possible if we could connect the data, if we could share the data from the municipality to the social affairs ministry and to the agency that is responsible for the childcare allowance, and let's see what happens. And wow, amazing things happen. People work together that didn't work together before. They created a prototype that I showed also during a roundtable discussion this morning. This prototype is really available. And based on that, they're now changing the laws in order to make it happen. So you can change the perspective in order really to change the experience of citizens or businesses when they interact with the public administration. Let me give you another example of what change is not and what change is. In every country in Europe, we have national employment agencies. This is, of course, a big priority to be able to find or to connect people that are looking for jobs with companies that are looking for talent. So in France, it's Pôle emploi. It's the national employment agency that you have also in every country, who traditionally had as their main product the job portal. And they could continue improving the job portal so that it gets better and better and better and better. But something has changed, of course they realized, and I'm sure you know that this has changed. People do not look for jobs anymore on the job portals. And companies also don't advertise any more jobs on the national job portal. In fact, in France, only 3 out of 10 new jobs that are recruited, or 10 people that are recruited into new jobs, only 3 of them came through an officially advertised job. All the rest came through, as we know it, social media, recruiting agencies, headhunters, social networks, and so on. So how can you, as a public sector agency, then think, go to bed quietly and think about your future? Oh, you will always exist and you will always have the budget. Maybe not. So you need to change in order to stay relevant. And that was the change of the form that I was trying to describe. Not just to solve the existing problems, but to change the form. And they did it with, for example, and it's just one example, they created a new service based on an algorithm that tries to predict the companies that are likely to recruit in the next 5 to 6 months. Based on that, if I look for a job as an electrical engineer in the Lille area, I get a list of job ads, but I also get a list of maybe 5 companies that don't have job ads right now, but that are maybe worth to apply for. And they created more and more and more and more of these value-added services in order to change the service that they provide. I mentioned, and I think you also heard about the artificial intelligence, which is, of course, a huge new opportunity. And what I just described in the French Employment Agency is use of AI technologies. But I like to use the term augmented intelligence because it is a way of using the algorithms together with the human capabilities, with the human, possibilities that we have. And these are some of the examples that we see across the world public administrations do already now, today. Process optimization, chatbots, diagnostics, and so on and so forth. So this is already a reality that is happening. And I'm asking you also to think about how you can use some of these in your work, but also again, think not only about the existing problems, for example, fraud detection. I'm sure that we all know that already the police forces, the taxation departments, the inspectors, everybody uses fraud detection, and they use algorithms for that. Here in Poland, in France, in Germany, it doesn't matter. I mean, you all do it already. But think about it. If you can detect that you didn't say the truth when you were filling in some of the forms, or you were hiding some revenues that you have, you can do that today already. But if you can do that, then you can also tell you, listen, you have the right to some subsidies, but you never applied for them. We will do it for you. Because we have the data. We know that you are eligible to some state aid, to some assistance. So you can turn fraud detection around into something positive, where you become proactive, for example, towards citizens that have the right to some subsidies, but are not asking for them because it's too complicated. Or towards businesses, small and medium-sized companies that maybe have completely different things on their agenda than interacting with the administration. You can be proactive towards them. But okay, I mean, I want to not only say that augmented or artificial intelligence has only big promises. There are also some risks, and you need to be very aware of these risks and these challenges in the public sector while you experiment. Because you need to experiment with augmented intelligence. There's a lot of uncertainty. While you do that, be aware that there are already cases where public administration try to predict families that are at the risk of abusing children. It's a very important topic, but it's also very sensitive in terms of making sure that this actually works and doesn't create some new, scary or even creepy ways of interacting with people's lives. Police forces used predictive policing, but also went back again because they said it doesn't work as good as we thought. Another good example, in France, last year, I think it was the first time that somewhere in the world people demonstrated against algorithms. That's what the French students did last year. When you had all these Gilets jaunes protests that you all saw on TV that are still continuing, in parallel, at some point, you also had the students joining in because there was an outrage about how the state allocates students to universities through an algorithm. That algorithm was completely untransparent and a black box, and the students went to the streets. You will see more of that. If you're not transparent and if you're open, you will see more public outrage against algorithms. Because algorithms can have things like ethical issues. They can have things like vendors, technology companies that promise a lot, but the reality is maybe not as bright. Black boxes. There's a tendency sometimes to trust the algorithms more than the people. Both are trustworthy, but different in different occasions. You need to work with that. And of course, inequality, if it exists already in your databases, it will also exist in your new digital services that are based on artificial intelligence. So these are some of the examples that I wanted to share with you what change is about. Change is happening, it takes place, and I gave you this example. You can make life easier for parents, for people who seek jobs, for companies, for businesses that want to employ talent. You also need to weigh some of the opportunities with the risks. But the changes are happening, and they are coming. The question is now, can you already shape and anticipate some of the things, or will you just wait and see what happens? If you want, and it's usually the better path, if you want to shape and anticipate these things, how to change the culture in the public sector in order to embrace the uncertainty, here's some guidance that I think I can give you from interacting with the different public administrations. Let's start first with the analysis of quite simply, what are the top barriers for transformation? What are the big problems that public sector sees when implementing digital government or digital strategies? The top ones are and these are from our surveys that come from governments from all over the world, including also in Poland, including at the national, at the regional, at the local levels. The first two are always about we don't have enough resources and we don't have enough money. I mean, in terms of resources, not enough, not the right people, not enough people, and not enough money. That's something usual, and that can be overcome. What is more tricky are the number 3 and number 4. The culture in our administrations and the lack of innovation, the lack maybe sometimes of willingness to innovate, and sometimes the lack of knowing how to innovate. And these two are critical because, and I didn't say this, I just like this citation very much, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can have a great strategy formulated by the politicians, by the leaders. If the administrative culture is not taking and internalizing that, it's likely nothing is going to happen, or very little. And in fact, this sentence summarizes 20 years of e-government. So what can you do in order to move away from this e-government thinking that I was trying to say, well, what can we do in our agency towards really changing the form of the administration? Start simple. Use actual stories that people can understand. You know, I read a lot of government strategies on digital and so on. Half of them I don't understand. I mean, they are so full of jargon, they are complicated and so on. And some things are complicated. But some things need to be able to be understood, as in, what do you want to achieve for the citizens or for the businesses? For example, what is going to change when you need support while finding work? What's going to change for business owners? What's going to change for families? This is the Australian government who started their strategy like this, with little videos and a little explanation of how are things today and how do we want things to be in 2025. And that's useful for 2 reasons. First, everybody can understand it. So everybody has a sense of purpose. Of course, we want things to be easier, simpler, better, quicker in 2025. So, and that's the second thing. It's consensual. Usually people will agree on the longer term thing. So that's a good basis to start with. Use stories in your daily life, public administrations do it, on what do you want to achieve through digital change. Okay, but I would say this is still probably the easy part. Now it gets tricky. How do you make the stories, how do you turn the stories into reality? The old way, which doesn't work anymore, the old way of turning stories into reality is legal department in some ministry, some agency, some municipality, legal department writes up the specifications and the requirements. This is what we want. This is what we need. Comes in the IT department. We're going to give you this, this, and that. So you tick off the boxes and you have the typical project. Maybe sometimes you involve, of course, some outsourcing companies, some consultings, and so on. And you develop. And usually in the public sector, things take a while. So it takes maybe a year, 2, probably rather 3 or 4. And then, ba-bam, you launch the product. Some testing was done, but in general, you launch the product. And what happens is then comes the disappointment. It's not at all what we imagined, and it's certainly not at all what the people wanted that we were developing it for. This is a very typical linear process in the administrations where there's a ping pong between the, let's say, the business department, you know, department responsible for something, and the IT department. Ping pong, ping pong, ping pong, and then at some point comes a product. It's also called waterfall sometimes. It's very linear. And we have so many examples of this process taking place, and it leads to disappointment. Luckily, and this is really very encouraging, there are more and more very bureaucratic governments and administrations that are trying something very new, which is this discovery. So you start inviting some people, for example, the parents, real parents, and you invite for feedback, and you try to build something with them. You invite business owners, small business, self-employed people, and you say, how can we do things differently? Let's try to work out something together. Let's check what are the actual problems. Do we even understand the problems really? And then you enlarge the scope of your perimeter, of your project, if you like. But you do it with a modest start. And that modesty is sometimes still difficult in the administration, but it's important because you don't know what the outcome will be in many cases. And that's a very important point to make. You need to shift from engineering towards innovation. You know, with a car, it's very clear. We've been building cars for 100 years. We've been building bridges, buildings, streets, cars for a long time. So there's a real experience there. And when you start to create a new car, it's an engineering issue. So you know how the project's going to be, you know how the different parties are going to interact, you know what the final product is going to be about. And you also know very clearly that me as a citizen who buys a car, I do not want to buy a prototype, right? I don't want to have this car. I don't want to drive it. I don't want to pay for that. But that is very different for digital products. Because in digital products today, there is not a century of experiences, and also user needs keep on changing all the time. So instead of talking about precision and having the perfect thing at the launch, you accept that there's uncertainty. Because you all, and the citizens and the businesses that you interact with, we all accept the uncertainty. All our apps, everything that we use in our daily lives are changing all the time. So public administration digital services also don't have to be perfect at the start like a car has to be. And these are just some examples of the UK government, French government, Italian government, ATO, that's the Australian Tax Administration Office. They have a beta office just for that, just for innovating and experimenting. Pôle emploi, Le Lab, so you have a laboratory. In Germany you have this as well. And I know that in Poland they're also coming up, and you need more of that. You need more of this kind of shift away from the engineering towards the innovation. Because innovation allows you, like I said, to be modest, to start small, but having at least, if they're small but tangible steps, very often they're much better than those big ambitions which stay completely abstract and don't have a tangible result anywhere, nor at the middle, nor at the end. Here's an example. The Italian administration created an app. Sorry, I'm wrong. The Italian administration is creating an app. And that is what shows you already. They just created a prototype and initially tested it with people from the administration. And then they asked the people from the administration to go and ask that their families use it. Now that they have the third or fourth round of these iterations, they're launching it with a couple of municipalities and a couple of ministries to test it. So you see, it starts very small, and then because it's so good from the beginning and so tangible, you get a lot of feedback on how to do it better. I'm pretty sure at the launch, and this has taken only just about a year, but at the launch, this will already have a lot of people that believe in it, that it's good, so you don't need to convince so many people anymore, because that's what often happens when you are in the public administration. You build something for 3 years, closed, and then you launch it, but you have to convince everybody that's good. That's already built in this process. Similar for something that in France is happening in one of the innovation labs in the public administration. They realized, of course, they want to have a big support to small companies, small and medium-sized companies. Especially small and medium-sized companies that run into some difficulties. For example, if they need to fire some people because they don't have any more revenues, or if maybe at some point they need to declare bankruptcy. So these companies usually call the public administration for help at some point. Now the public administration, somebody said, in one region of France said, look, we have all this data. Can we not share some of the data to create an algorithm that tries to predict which of the companies over the next 10 months will run into financial difficulties? This sharing of data was not foreseen by law. You cannot share the data. But they used historical data to create a prototype, and it was so convincing that they created an actual product. And now it already works in one region. The civil administrators use it as an early warning system, signaux faibles, weak signals. And they reach out to the companies to avoid that they file bankruptcy, to avoid that they let off people. And it's now being used across the French administration as we speak during this year. So again, small but tangible steps. And then this one thing that I already showed to you, this is a public prototype of this example I gave you in the very beginning. Parents in Germany who so far have to do separately, there are 3 steps, separately apply for parental assistance, for childcare assistance, and for the birth certificate. The administration does not have the right to exchange that data to make life easier for citizens. That's the law today. But some people said in the administration, but we want to challenge those laws because they don't make sense anymore in the 21st century. But let's not wait until all the conditions are there, until all the laws are changed. Let's build a prototype first of something, and thank you for the remark this morning, something that if it existed today, it would be legal. But they created a prototype in a protected environment to test something and to see what will be the feedback from parents, from agencies, from the government. And now it's working quite well, and now they are adapting the laws in order to make this a reality. It started with a big idea, a story, gradual steps, modest steps, and now we're coming into the phase where the laws are being changed in order to make this a reality. Maybe one last thing, and then I'm going to already wrap this up. A lot of people will say that, okay, but how are we going to do this when we don't have the skills for that? You know, you're talking about some things like creating prototypes, agile development, user experience, citizen experience. Wow, I mean, it's true. It is a challenge because you need new skills and new roles. These are the ones that are emerging in public administrations everywhere. You need people that know what is user experience design and how do you design a better user experience. You need people who know what to do with algorithms and with models in order to do things like fraud detection, in order to be proactive. You need people like data officers or API product managers. But I agree with you, it's not easy to get them. And the usual ways that the public administration gets new people is, of course, to hire new people, to develop the existing people, or to hire consultancies. I'm going to simplify drastically here, but hiring new people, of course, very often you are going to tell me, oh, we don't have the money for that, and it's also quite a procedure. Developing new people is very useful, very good, but it's true, it does take time. I mean, it will take time to move somebody into a user experience designer role. It can take anything from months to years to do that. And consultancies, well, okay, I mean, they can do the job well, but very often you have the problem that they fulfill something, a requirement, deliver, and then they're gone. But the administration hasn't learned along the process. They receive the product, but they haven't learned from the process. So there's a fourth way which rarely comes up, but more and more it does, and I'm very happy about that, which is what we call fellowships. And this is the good news that I want to share with you. Aside from these 3 options, there's another option, and people really want to work with the public sector. So fellowships, the way that they are being organized now in France, in Germany, in Sweden, in the US, in a couple of other countries, you know, it's really an interesting concept. You say you have an idea, but you don't have the right people to implement it. So you invite somebody from the public, but when I say public, it can be an expert, can be a designer, can be an academic, can be a business. You know, you create a fellowship program where for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 months, these people work together with you to create a first prototype, something tangible of change. And this happens, this really actually happens. And things like this happen in public administrations, in some of the most bureaucratic, some of the most conservative, some of the big complex ones that I've seen in Europe. This is happening. And why? Because they're finding people that are motivated to work with the public sector in order to change things. And to show you that I'm not just making this up, you know, I mean, these programs exist and you can look them up, but also this is a very tangible example. Now it's a couple of months already in April, end of April. This is a guy who lives in Berlin, is a user experience designer, has nothing to do with the public sector, but who said, oh wow, I heard about these great things that you do. If you do them here in Berlin, I would join you. I would do that with you. And I would take, and that's an interesting point there, I would take a pay cut. My point to you here is, people that want to, or the right people you will find will be motivated by the possibility to do something really interesting with the public sector. They don't necessarily need a lifelong contract and a great pay. They just want to work on something really incredible and interesting, and that happens really. NGOs in Poland exist, businesses in Poland exist, academia in Poland exists, young people, experienced people. There are fellowship possibilities that you can use in order to get some of those good people into the public sector for a limited time. And sometimes they can maybe stay, but most of all, at the beginning, it's really for a limited time. So the suggested next steps really are, we have some models, and I'm not going to go into this in any detail, but it's very clear that public sector is not one big entity, but there are different organizations, and depending on where you would be on this matrix between urgency and readiness for change, there are different recipes on what to do next. And it's very, I hope it's intuitive, because readiness means, if you think about yourself, you're a public employment agency, the urgency is really high to change the way that you do business today, because the people, your main citizens and your and the people that recruit have changed how they do business. So you as an employment agency must change as soon as possible. But if you're, for example, a statistical agency, or maybe a smaller municipality, then things don't have to go so quick immediately right now. But, for example, readiness is another factor. Depending, bigger municipalities usually have more experience already with digital transformation than smaller municipalities. And the readiness also is different from, let's say, tax administrations who already use data analytics compared to maybe employment agencies who don't use them so much yet. So depending on where you are in this, there are good, and this is actually a public resource, so there's a link down there, but we can share that with you later on. You can use it to check where you are today, a reality check, and what would be suggested next steps. But as a summary, the next steps that I would suggest to you now is really start thinking about those future stories. It's very simple, but try to communicate. Are you able to tell people, what is the digital transformation about? Who is it for, and what is it for? What's the purpose? Try to make it didactic even. Try to make a YouTube video. Anything goes, but really be simple and be creative about that. And then try to make some tangible progress towards that future story. Can you imagine doing a prototype, a public prototype, like the thing that I showed you from Germany, something that would not be legal today, but that makes common sense? Put it as a service. It's a mock-up. It doesn't work yet. I can do it, but it doesn't work yet. But it's just a service to show the power of the possible. And then you really need to make the shift away from this precision and engineering, which digital transformation is not about. Digital transformation and change is about uncertainty. You cannot plan digital change. You can try to approach it and so on, but you cannot build it like you build a car. It has to be quite different. Beta versions, alpha versions, prototypes, and so on. And then, be confident that you can find talent. Maybe not in those traditional 3 ways that I mentioned, but there are other ways today, and that's where digitalization comes in again. There are so many communities out there. You can find talent that wants to work with you on something interesting. You need to make an effort, though, to open up. And then definitely, I hope that this kind of framework that we have about pacing, about giving the right speed for transformation is useful, so that you can do a reality check of where you are today and what makes sense for you in the next couple of 12 to 24 months. So I thank you very much for this, and I hope that there's going to be really lively exchanges. Well, I only speak English, but I hope that within the ranks of yourselves, you'll have really great discussions today. Thank you very much. Dziękuję bardzo.